Good morning. Well, I'm on the road. I'm in San Diego, and I want to continue this discussion about target panic because I think I know it's helping people to think through as they deal with it, because there's a significant number of folks out there with target panics in some way, shape, or form, and everybody wants to get rid of it. Everybody wants to find something that'll help, and so I want to continue this dialogue of my journey. So as I've really dove in and called everybody or reached out to everybody that's dealt with it and seems to have overcome it to a degree, learned to manage it well enough to shoot well, or as I mentioned in the last one, Joel, who largely his shtick is the overcoming the target panic. So what I found is a lot of people out there can identify what you should do. And it's interesting. There's been some, I've received a lot of messages, a lot of emails, a lot of calls, a lot of texts, and people almost get angry. This information's been out there. This information, hold on a minute. Let me tell you this. A lot of people tell you what you should do, but none of that was really new to me. I know that the aim can't be the trigger for the shot. So when the tip of the arrow hits the dot, that can't be the trigger to shoot the arrow. You have to separate aiming from shot execution. I know that. That's been said by many people. We have to be able to not make aiming the priority. That can't become the hardest, most, focus so hard on aiming that becomes the priority. I know that has to be separated. So all these people have been telling me what I need to do. Got it. How do I do it? That's what's lacking. How is what I want to focus on. So let's start with, I want to tell you a story about the clicker. The clicker solves all of this, which is not an option for me, but the clicker solves it for a few reasons. Number one, you got to aim, but you can't shoot until the clicker goes off. Well, the clicker forces you to pull through it to make it click. That becomes the trigger. Now we got good form and we're shooting. No, it wasn't the first year, but one year, Tim Strickland, good friend of mine, 1996 U.S. Olympic coach. Tim was shooting longbow at the IBO Worlds, and we got down to the Three Rivers showcase shoot down, the shoot where everybody goes head to head. We're in the field, and it winds up two people left. Mark Lind, another great friend of mine, shooting barebow, RU and IBO, but barebow. So he's shooting a clicker and he's string walking. Tim is gapping, shooting a longbow. And Tim winds up winning that thing. He shot lights out. 11 after 11 that day. And afterwards, I was talking to Tim, and I said, Tim, were you concerned that Mark was string walking? He said, no, I was scared of the clicker. And I said, really? He said, Jimmy, a guy that knows how to shoot a clicker, that's a game changer. Well, it is for several reasons. Why? Because number one, it's a draw check device. No matter the terrain, the elevation, what angles you're shooting, you've got to pull the bow to the same length every time to get the clicker to go off. Number two, it's dynamic. You have to be pulling to get through the clicker. So you can't collapse and get the clicker to go off. So now you got a device that has forced you to draw to the same point every time and be pulling through it for great shot execution in order to get it to click. It also solves your target panic, okay? Because you're now aiming, but you can't shoot. That cannot be the trigger. You've got to do something else. You got to execute, pull back tension, come through that clicker and shoot. And Tim said, a clicker's a game changer, man. It's huge. So it is. So that's what we have to do now. How do we create a clicker of some sort, whatever that is, that will separate aiming from the rest of the shot? That will not allow aiming to be the priority. That, the tip's got to be down there, but as and I'm going to refer to this a couple of times. The Barebow Project had Grayson Partlow and John Dimmer on, and they talked about this. And John and Grayson said, a poorly aimed arrow that is executed well will always outperform an arrow that is aimed really well but poorly executed in terms of shot execution. I totally agree. As long as you're pretty close and you have a really, really solid bow arm at 18 meters, 20 yards, that thing's going to be pretty darn close. You're going to shoot pretty well, okay? But you got to get the mechanics together. So how do we do that? How do we replace that clicker with something that'll allow us to separate? And that's the void, okay? So then you see Joel starts telling everybody about grip seers, right? And I go to a shoot right after this all starts, and I was pretty upset about it. I'm totally, transparent, because I saw guys who had drilled their risers, they had put guitar picks on there, that filed them down, they'd done all this stuff to create a device that I said is against the rules. Was there a rule that said you can't shoot a grip seer? No, but it was a altered bow creating a device to overcome target panic, which all of us are dealing with. So it was an unfair advantage. And I said, I'll be the first to protest that. I'm just telling you straight up, I'm not the weasel that will go protest you after the shoot, which, yeah, some of you listening have done that. It's pretty cowardly. Just go to the person and say, look, man, that's wrong. You're doing this. You've got your bow set up this way. You either stop or I'm going to protest you. If you're confident you'll win, then great. But you know what? My money's going on it. That's just me. I believe that that's the way it should be done. Or you can go behind. That's a whole different video, though. But I said that up front. I'm going to do that. If I'm in the class and I'm shooting and you have got a guitar pick screwed into your riser, I'm saying you've got a device on your bow that creates an unfair advantage. And so I had a problem with that. But if you're not shooting in the tournament with guys, it's not an unfair advantage. It's a good way to say, okay, I'm going to aim, but I can't shoot this arrow until I start squeezing on this sear, whatever, however you've devised this device, until it clicks, my fingernail comes off of it, whatever. And that is my clicker that says I'm going to shoot the arrow, meanwhile I'm pulling. So that was a way, and it helped a lot of people. Okay, the other way is we have to create something, which is what Joel did for me. Rod taught this, as I said in the last video, which was committing to the shot. So it was more of a mental thing of I'm committing to this shot. Am I going to shoot it or let it down? Is everything right? And I'd always known that and been taught that, but I didn't have any. I needed something harder, which Joel suggested I do the gun safety. However I created that. Right now, today, that's working well for me. I will admit, sometimes I shoot through the safety. The safety is the trigger, and that's a no-go. So I'm going to continue to work on this. It may be blinking your eyes. It may be putting your finger on the riser, then taking your finger off the riser. It may be tapping your right big toe. Whatever it is, we've got to separate that aiming from the shot execution. And I believe right now, I'm really early in this. As I said last video, I'm really hesitant to start proclaiming this, from the courthouse in the city square. But I believe that practicing it over time can help to manage it. And then in a high pressure situation, when I stand on the line at Lancaster, that anxiety is much higher, right? It's going to start building, and then I'm going to have to focus on, I got to have a hard process with words and a checklist that I can fall back on, default to, versus the emotion and all those thoughts enter my mind. Something Grayson and John discussed in this Barebow Project video, if you haven't seen it, you should go look at it, that I think is really well, I think it was John talked about the anxiety building when you start aiming, but you got to get through it and there's calm on the other side. That I've not heard that said that way, but I love it. And I think, I may be wrong, Michael Fisher do this in the shoot down several years ago, where I saw him kind of like that every time, and I thought, oh, there it went. But he didn't. He held on. He didn't shoot. Most people, when they go, then they go like this, and the arrow's gone, and you miss the target. But John's saying that anxiety builds, hold in there, we're not ready to shoot, safety's still on, get through that, and then calm comes. And if we can practice that through aiming drills, then getting to calm may come a lot easier. I hope this helps. We got to separate those two. Everybody knew that, but how? That's what you've got to focus on, like me. Get to the how and find that how for you, some way that is words, that is a movement, that is something that tells you, okay, now the safety's off, I can execute, but I've separated them. The how's what's important, I believe, right now.